You're ready, Deirdre.
I just pressed recording, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Millis Finance Committee meeting. This is Wednesday, May 27th. I'm Jody Garzon, the chair. With us are members Pete Berube, Joyce Boyardi, Katie Tu. We have Cathy MacInnes and Sean Power. We also have several guests. We're going to hear from Mark Conroy and probably Terry Wiggin about the school budget and their revised operating budget. Then we're going to discuss warrant articles 19, 20, and 21. And then continue to discuss the fiscal year 21 municipal operating budget and the June 2020 warrant articles. And then we'll just attend to some of our committee business after that. So thank you everyone for joining us. And I'm gonna ask Mark Conroy to present to us where the schools are with their FY21 budgets.
All right, thanks, Jody. Did everybody, was there time to disseminate the memo that we sent out last night to you and Deirdre?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So people had the memo. So really we came in, our revised budget, we came in at a 4% requested increase. Now, originally that was closer to 4.5% to 5%, but we already looked at reductions to get down to the agreed upon goal of a 4% increase in operating budget. So we had already eliminated things like 2% increases to supplies, and we had reduced, just based on historical data, how much we anticipate having to pay in certain increases to salary based on certain education credits staff get. So we coming into 4, we had already made a handful of adjustments. So now to take the 5%, to get to another 5% off of our requested budget, the first thing we did is we had intended on moving a couple of teacher salaries out of the school choice revolving fund and into the operating budget. This is something we've been trying to do for a while, just to minimize what's coming in or what's being paid out in terms of ongoing expenses out of school choice. So this was actually, we've been managing our contracts, et cetera, in part to attempt to be able to do this. And this was finally the year we were going to make some headway at doing that. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that with the 5% reduction. So what that means is we're spending more out of choice, out of historical surpluses. We're spending more than we're bringing in once again next year. So strategically, we're looking to get out of that, but we're not going to be able to do that this year. The second largest item is, again, something we do each year, but thankfully to a late payment, extraordinary payment out of the circuit breaker fund that recognizes some additional costs that we had. We just recently received additional $90,000 in circuit breaker funds this year from the state. So we're going to be able to use that to prepay out of district tuitions for fiscal 21. That $90,000 plus an additional $30,000 that we had saved in out of district tuition for this year, we're going to use both of those to make $120,000 prepaid tuition. So in essence, reducing our out of district tuition requirement for next year. The rest are kind of smaller dollars, but again, given we've already eliminated and basically coming into this had level funded our supplies and expenses, operations maintenance we're reducing by 11%, athletics and ticket takers. So we have had at times historically had that paid out of the operating budget. We're going to have to use the revolving fund to pay for that next year. Utilities, we've seen some historical savings in utilities, so we're recognizing some of that. Professional development, so we're reducing the amount that we're able to pay for professional conferences. We're actually reducing the number of individuals who are going to serve on the professional development committee because there was a stipend assigned to that. So we've reduced the funds available for that. Technology equipment, we're going to defer some purchasing of technology, and supplies and materials. We've reduced the supplies and materials budget specific to each of the 3 schools by 5%. So that's how we get to the $9,000. So that gets us, that's what we're doing to come up with the $275,000 reduction from our requested budget, to recognize the 5% reduction. One thing, I'll take some questions, but I do, just because I know 10% is also a number that's been talked about. And again, because we don't know what the number is, we've gone through the exercise of what 5% would look like. If we have to go to 10%, sorry, an additional 5, if we have to go to an overall 10%, we're not going to be able to avoid personnel, and it would result in 4.5 FTEs, 20,000 in maintenance, all of our summer help, which does a lot of our technology and getting the school ready, which again, you know, is potentially a catch-22 as we're trying to prepare for the unknown of what the fall is going to look like. We'd have to not have any of the temporary summer help that comes in. So again, I've said it when I've spoken to you guys before, and I've said it at a select board meeting. I think we have to look at other alternatives if we get reductions greater than 5%. Because again, when you're talking about FTEs, you know, it's one thing to say it's 4.5, but unfortunately we also have unemployment costs that really make it, you know, 2.5 times that if we were actually reducing people, because of the unemployment costs that we would have to incur as the town. We'd have to actually reduce more staff just to cover that. So that 4.5 really could look like 9 to 12, which is just a really big number. So hopefully we don't have to get to 10%, either because the state doesn't reduce it or because we as a town choose to use some rainy day funds to alleviate that. But so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
One of the questions that I had was, what is the balance on the school choice revolving fund at this point?
So with this spending into next year, we will end next year. It'll bring it down to 150,000 at the end of fiscal 21. So we're spending right now about 600,000 out of it a year. We get about in between 400 and 500. So we're running a yearly deficit of about 200,000. Our goal as a committee, we set up minimum values for our reserve funds or revolving funds, probably now 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit more, really for this purpose. Like there were balances in there, and we wanted to have a purpose for having any balance in there at all. And so what our threshold really for the school choice was really around 200,000. And we got to that by, we'd like to have around 2 FTEs in there, 2 full-time, including benefits. So we're looking at going slightly below where we'd like to keep our minimum. We won't be able to do it at this level next year. So, you know, we were looking, if we were able to move this 100,000, we were looking at being right around where we wanted to keep our minimum, but we're not going to be able to do that this year or for fiscal 21.
Thanks. Other questions?
Jody, I've got a couple.
Sure, go ahead, Pete.
Good evening. Hey, Mark. Do you know of any other districts that are planning to the 5% cut? The reason I ask is because in the research that I've done, I haven't found any. Everybody's upwards of 10 to 15 to 20%, even if it's their doomsday planning, guidance that they've received from their town's government. They're doing more than 5%. I haven't found one town that's only cutting to 5%. Not that that's an exhaustive, scientific search either.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't done a whole lot of research on it, and as of what's presented in front of me is a request for a 5%, and that's what we have. Obviously, we've also done 10%, so we've done it. But at the same time, we're also filling out a form to, quantify and justify in between $700,000 and $800,000 of state and federal money. It just unfortunately, I don't think there's a right answer. I think the right answer is to attempt to have an idea of whichever way it can go. We've got 5, we've done 10. I know some towns are not passing budgets and they're punting their town meeting till fall and just using a 1/12 budget because they just don't know the answer. Again, I've said it. I said it the last time I spoke to you guys. I've said it pretty much anywhere I can. If we're talking about more than 5%, my personal opinion is there needs to be concrete discussion about stabilization.
Yeah, thank you. A couple more, if I may, Madam Chair. Does the school have any pending hiring actions?
No new hires. No new positions.
Actually, Mark, can I correct
Yep.
that with one exception?
Yep.
There is, and I think we discussed it in our budget presentation, there is a new transition program where we are sharing with Medfield. And so there are some new positions, and we have a transportation obligation as part of a shared program, but that's offset by tuition savings. And it's actually a win for the district as far as financial savings by implementing that program. It's the 18 to 21-year-old transition program for special ed. But that's the only one.
So
okay.
By doing it, we're saving.
It's unique.
Good.
We're saving out of district tuitions.
Right.
Thank you. And then one more, if I may, and I'm not sure, frankly, if this is better directed to you or to town administrator, but has anybody approached either probably by letter, Tri-County or Norfolk Aggie to request, I guess to seek, I know that they seem to be immune to budget cuts, and we don't get much say through this process or really any other to influence their budget or our tuition payment to them. But has anybody reached out to them to request that they do so, cut their budgets, cut their spending, and reduce tuition?
I don't know that anybody has, but that's actually a good idea, and I'll follow up with that because I think that's I think that should be looked at and potentially even reached out to our state legislators and asked them to urge them to do it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it's just a time. I'm the doomsday guy here. I know you've heard me on many of the meetings, and if by the grace of God and people coming together to find a way to get the budgets where they hopefully we get some aid. Less that happening, I think this is a time for universal budget belt tightening, and nobody should be immune to it, including the Aggie. And I think any reasonable person would probably agree with that. I don't know for sure, but thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? we have for our school friends?
Madam Chair, Cathy MacInnes.
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Just a follow-up, Chairman Mark, on the choice. Now, those are the kids that are coming into Millis, right?
Yes.
Okay. I get confused with their choosing to go outside of Millis.
Yep.
So I understand that more money is going out than coming in. Did I understand correctly?
No, the other way around. There's more coming in than going out, which
Okay.
is why we have surpluses, historical surpluses that we've been able to utilize to bring the balance down and save costs through our contracts. But we still have more kids coming to Millis than leaving Millis through school choice.
Thank you for clarifying that for me.
But I think it's worth also clarifying, while there are more kids coming into Millis than leaving Millis, we are spending that surplus down faster than we're replenishing the revolving fund. Like, we're using some of those funds to plug in to the operating budget. And that right, is that correct, Mark? That's a good characterization.
Yeah, I mean, we're using school choice funds to cover salaries to cover salaries. We are currently spending more out of that revolving fund than we're bringing in on a yearly basis, which is not a great place to be, but it's been out of necessity. And we're coming to a point where we aren't going to be able to do it at this level for very much longer, which is why we were trying to get salaries back into the operating budget out of that revolving fund.
Thanks, Mark. I know that we're not the only district that's kind of facing this reality of using the school choice funds to balance or to supplement, I will say, the school budgets.
Yeah.
And it's not a completely reliable source of income long term. We just don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty with it, because it depends on how many kids we have coming in and how many kids we have growing out. So. Kathy, you have other questions?
Madam Chair, Kathy again. Yeah,
Yes.
I think I'm still confused, and I apologize, folks. What I meant was the money the district spends, the Millis district spends on the school choice students. Is that less than the money that the school choice students bring into the district?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of two parts of that equation.
Because there'll come a point when it's the other way around, unfortunately, whether to continue with school choice.
Right. That is,
Okay.
that could happen. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mute.
One thing so each year we have to vote to continue to be a school choice district. We look at enrollment numbers each year as part of that, and we're allowed as a district to close certain grades if our enrollment is too high in a given grade. We would not put ourselves in a position, and I'll just speak for the existing committee because I can't commit future ones, but it would be not advantageous to anybody to allow more students to come in that would trigger the requirement of hiring additional teachers or adding classrooms, because then the cost you're bringing in would evaporate in having to hire a new teacher or multiple staff because you're adding an additional classroom. Right now, we only bring students in grades where their addition to the grade will have no impact on the number of teachers we need for the grade, et cetera.
And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, prior to the construction of the new school, it wasn't that many years ago that you did indeed have to close off a class, an elementary class.
Yeah. Yeah, there have been years where we close grades,
Right.
from availability.
Yep.
Other questions? All right. Is there anything else with the school budgets that we need to know at this point?
No, I think they are what they are, and when if we get additional information and need to make adjustments, we'll do that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight to go over, your recommendations, your, your proposal in terms of the 5% cut to what you had already proposed. So,
No problem. Thanks for having us.
yeah, thank you so much. And
right.
if we have other questions, we'll reach out.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
You.
Thank you.
Next, we're gonna go over warrant articles 19, 20, and 21. We had some questions about that last time and some technical difficulties. So this is in regards to some changes to exemptions to allow for more households in Millis to be able to take advantage of programs that we have. So I believe we have the assistant assessor here with us tonight, and maybe she can go over some of what we've been provided with our meeting materials.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. This is Terry, the assessor. What type of questions did you have for me?
Well, maybe you could just kind of explain what the changes would represent that are being proposed in terms of the different programs. We looked at the articles last week. And so maybe you can go over kind of what the exemptions are right now and what the proposed changes would mean for expanding those programs.
Okay, 1 second, I need one piece of paper.
I need to make mine bigger so I can actually read it.
Okay, currently the town of Millis offers a 17D, which is an exemption for widows, seniors, and widowers. It's in the amount of $175. And what we're looking to do, one of the articles is to change the asset amount every year by COLA, which is what we're doing with the 41C right now. And COLA ranges from no change. The highest I've ever seen it is 3.5%. Currently, Millis only has 4 people that get the 17D. I don't know if it would go up a great deal, but currently only 4 people are eligible for that. The other article is to change the maximum income for the 41A, which is a deferral, from $20,000 to $40,000. Currently, there are no deferrals in Millis. A deferral is the ability for a homeowner to defer all or part of their taxes each year. They cannot defer more than 50% of the value of their home overall.
And then that would be recovered when they sell the house?
When they sell the house, yes.
Okay.
And there is, the current interest rate in Millis is 8%. The towns do have the ability to lower that interest rate if they so choose. Right now, Millis is at 8%. The other article we have is the 41C to lower the age from 70 to 65 to make more people eligible. Right now, on the 41C for 2020, there were only 6 people that received it.
Yep.
Going by our historic numbers, I don't see that there would be a large influx of people, possibly 10, but then that's just using information that I have from the Census Bureau. Homeowners, you have to own the home. It has to be your main residence. If you have a second home, that would automatically make you ineligible for the program. And the Board of Selectmen did ask us to come up with some programs that would be more helpful to our seniors.
Yes, I understand that's kind of what precipitated these recommended changes to the guidelines that we currently have. And then what was provided to us is information on other exemptions that hopefully folks in town are aware of, but the veterans and surviving spouses exemptions, and for the blind, and the senior tax credit program, and the veterans tax credit program. So it looks like those other programs have a few more folks kind of participating in those than these other 3 that you're recommending changes to. Yeah.
The Veterans Program is the highest program in Millis. For 2020, there were 53 people that were involved in the Veterans Program. The dollar amounts offered in the Veterans Program are not up to the town. Those are guidelines from the federal and state government. The blind, again, is the state. The town either does a 37 or a 37A, which is $450 or $500. Millis does the $500 for the blind.
Okay.
And the senior work program and the veterans tax work program is overseen by the Council on Aging.
Yep. Okay. Do folks have questions for our assessor's office on this? Doug, you want to unmute yourself?
There we go.
Yep.
Sorry, the very first part of this, you were talking about the 41C. That's the deferred real estate taxes?
No, the 41A is the deferred. The 41C is the senior exemption for people 70 and over.
Okay. So the 41A, which is not listed on here, that's you can defer up to 50% of your tax bill?
No, you can defer up to 50% of the value of your home if you're on the program for 10 years.
Okay, so that's a cumulative value.
Yes.
Okay. And we charge 8% interest on that?
Yes. Currently, there are no people in Millis with the deferred program.
That could get expensive at 8%.
Yeah.
When you sell the home, it could get expensive, but it's an availability to people in case they need something like that, and they don't have to defer all of their taxes. They can defer $500 if that makes their lives just that little bit easier.
Okay. Yeah, this is helpful. I know I had asked the question last week about this, just trying to get some ballpark numbers on, essentially what the cost is to the town and what the marginal increase might be. So I'm good with all this. I mean, it sounds like maybe we could go from, few $1,000s to maybe double that if, if there's enough people between 65 and 70.
It's a
So
possibility.
this was helpful.
Other questions?
Madam Chair, question.
Yes, Katie.
Regarding 41C, regarding 41C, what are the other eligibility requirements besides age? Just curious. Is it largely income based? This is Article 19.
It is income and asset based. Yes, it's income and asset based for 41C.
Okay, just trying to understand why it's a low number.
What's a low number? I'm sorry.
The number of applicants. Sorry, I think I have a delay on the audio on my end.
Okay. I don't know. It could be that the public isn't aware of the programs. Also, when you apply for the programs, you have to supply the assessors, and only the assessors see this information. You have to supply them with a copy of your tax returns if you file tax returns. You have to supply a copy of all of your income. You have to supply bank statements for savings accounts, checking accounts, CDs. If you have stock, any financial information you have to supply to the Board of Assessors. Again, it's not available to the public, only to the Board of Assessors. And some people just don't want to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Joyce, go ahead.
On the deferment, the one you were talking, is it 41A, where they can defer and it's an 8%. Have you been, since you said there's no one who's doing that, has that come up for questioning? I mean, have residents asked if that's available? And is that why you want to implement it? I'm recently new to Millis, so I don't have a history with Millis as far as what's been requested by the residents. In my previous community, it was discussed. People did ask about it. The first community I worked in, we had a number of deferrals. My most recent community, I only had one. I can't give you any historical information on Millis. I just don't have it. I'm sorry. Well, and I apologize for not knowing, but has 41A always been available? It just hasn't been implemented, or is it new to Millis?
No, it's always been available. And all we're trying to do with the 41A is make the maximum income higher so that more people may be eligible for the program. Currently, the maximum income is $20,000. And so we're just trying to raise that threshold so it might make more people eligible.
And how is this different? And I don't know that you would know, but maybe somebody here would know. How is this different than, say, what is it, the reverse mortgage? Because there's reverse mortgage available that that banks offer, or that that seems to be recommended.
I do not have enough knowledge about reverse mortgages to speak on. How is it different?
Well, I mean,
a reverse mortgage you can borrow on a home.
But isn't that kind of what
this deferral you can't?
But you're deferring, you're kind of borrowing on your home.
You're only deferring your tax.
Right.
You are a little bit, but I mean, in the end, yes, you will be borrowing on your home. But it would be a much lower amount than a true reverse mortgage would be.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? All right. I think that's all we had for questions. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, though. This was helpful to really understand what the programs are. I appreciate the document that you put together for us. It's nice to have kind of all of that in one place so we can refer to it. Then we'll see kind of what the select board decides to do going forward in terms of their recommendations, in terms of the warrant. So thank you so much for joining us. It was nice to virtually meet you.
If anyone has any other questions, if anyone has any other questions, please either call me or send me an email and I'll do my best to give you answers.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Madam Chair?
Thank you.
Yes.
Have a nice night.
Yeah, Kathy.
I finally found out what Asstassr is. Did you see her name on hers?
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah. Assistant assessor.
Yeah, I'm like, who's Asstassr? I thought it was Lauren trying to pretend to be someone, you know? So, okay, thanks.
Yes, there you go.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Let's see. So next up on our agenda is the fiscal year 21 municipal operating budget review and discussion. Do we have specific items that we were looking to discuss? I see that we have Carol Johnston with us tonight. Is there...
Apologize for being late. I was actually working.
Yeah, no worries. It's been a day.
Yeah, tell me about it.
All right. So it looks like what was in our packet was kind of the same budget document that we had last week. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what Carol provided.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, I'm going through my all the documents that you provided us. So are there specific questions that we wanted to go over tonight in terms of the budget? As I understand it, the select board is meeting on June 1st, and they'll be looking at making their recommendations and kind of what their recommendations are going to be on the warrant articles as well. So we're waiting a little bit on what what those final details are going to be. So we will have those kind of those final documents to review next week. But I guess this is our opportunity to ask any questions that anyone may have at this point.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Kathy.
If I might, Cathy MacInnes, please. I just want to let the committee know that I really don't feel that the library just having to cut 5% from expenses is really fair to the staff at the Memorial Building. And I say that because the departments in the Memorial Building obviously don't have as much expenses that they could cut in order to meet the 5%. And also I understand that the library has a Friends of the Library group, which helps out a lot financially for their special incentives that they want. And, unfortunately, the Treasurer Collector's Office doesn't have a Friends, or the Friends of the DPW, or that have something like that, whereas all the Veterans Memorial Building has to, staff is being cut hours in their salaries. And I think it's only fair, Madam Chair, and to my committee, that we I would like to encourage the selectmen to, it's kind of all or nothing. You can't cut the police or the fire or the DPW, but the library should also have to have some hours cut, I believe, from their budget, even though they can meet it other ways. If you can cut your expenses by 5% without much of and still keeping the building hours open, and as a matter of fact, I think they're adding hours, which is even a double, to me, a whammy to the town employees, then you're obviously getting too much allocated each year in your expenses. So I just like people to maybe look into that a little more and think about it. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Joyce, you had something?
Just as to what Kathy said, I don't think that they added hours. I think they changed the hours so that they could be open Monday through Thursday and Saturday, but something about Friday, they were changing. I thought they were changing hours. I could be wrong. So, but that I know it's not on an agenda. And I agree with you, Kathy, that it's too bad, but about, you know, the memorial building cuts, but I think the library, the Friends of the Library, I don't think that they can spend the money. Like, we are restricted about how we can allocate our funds. They're restricted as to how they can allocate their funds. And they can't pay salaries with that. So neither a pro or con about it, just an explanation.
Other questions or?
Madam Chair, if I might, Kathy,
Sure.
Joyce, I knew that. I know they can't pay the salaries, but they can be paying for the 5% cuts in their expenses, is what I'm saying. And the people at the town hall don't have any groups supporting them that would do that, so that they could cut their expenses because someone else is paying for it. And as a result, they wouldn't have to cut any salaries as well. So I just, you know, they're all in this together, the town employees, and you know, I think committees and everybody should support what happens to one happens to the other, and that's just all I'd like everybody to think about. Thanks.
Has the town administrator discussed any of this, or the Board of Selectmen, or maybe Carol would know, because I don't see Mike here, or maybe Mike is here and I just don't see him. Has anybody spoken to the library about that?
I thought he was
Mike
the Asstassr, Mike.
No.
Oh.
Hi, this is Carol. Mike's not available tonight. He has some conference calls he had to work on. We haven't had any changes in anything since this was presented to you last week. I know the library did come back just with, like Joyce had mentioned, changing things around so that they could service the public, but no further discussion as to any additional cuts other than what was already presented.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Carol. Other questions for Carol? Well, we've got her captive.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Sure, go ahead, Kathy.
You know, we've got a lot of committee members that aren't talking or anything about that. Does anybody have any comments about the library, or is everybody, you know, at first blush satisfied with their deductions? Thanks.
Well, I guess my first pass on it is our role is to evaluate what's put in front of us. I think that if the goal is to get the 5% cuts, I'm not happy with the town hall cuts, quite honestly. They bother me. I think it's an action that is unfair to the employees at town hall, but I don't see the solution is to extend that to other employees if there's another way to cover it. But, you know, I would, you know, I'm leaving it like it is right now, but I wish the cuts to town hall weren't the ones that we're considering with the way they're being presented. It just reduces hours, and it doesn't give the opportunity for unemployment or anything else for the employees to even make up that difference in pay. So it is a straight out cut of 10% of their salary. If you cut 20% of the salary for some people, you would have the ability to collect unemployment, especially with the $600 COVID benefits. It doesn't hurt the employees nearly as much, but that's my thought on the whole thing. And I said that last week too, when we were looking at it. But I wouldn't cut the library just to make it equitable. I think sometimes fair and similar and identical aren't necessarily always the same thing. If there's another way to achieve it, I'm glad the library has the ability to achieve it differently.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I agree, particularly with town hall employees, that I don't like the idea of basically balancing the budget on their family incomes. But again, I don't necessarily think it's not our role to tell each department how the cuts are going to be made. But I think it's appropriate for us to express our opinions as to how the cuts are being presented. So anyway, I'll leave that as it is. I thought Pete had something he wanted to say.
I'm biting my tongue virtually because I've been outspoken, and I'll just say it one more time. Unfortunately, I think everybody's going to get a chance to feel the pain because I think 5% is not enough. It's not what's going to happen, is in my prediction, and I hope I'm wrong. I think there'll be plenty of opportunity, regrettably, for additional reductions to be made, which is what I'm an advocate for more, I guess you could say, peanut butter spread reductions, not cuts, to be made now in foresight of what could come and what is likely to come, versus cuts, ones and two cuts that if you're really just deferring or delaying the inevitable, it's going to be more painful to do that later, because there'll be less time to absorb the cut in the 21 budget. I've said it before, I'll likely say it again, unfortunately, but I'm glad we're discussing this now. You can go to the Franklin town government site and read the minutes or a letter that their school superintendent sent to their, I believe their town administrator, or to their town government, posted, and it talks about the cuts that the town of Franklin. I know we're not Franklin. I know that their school budget is 3 times ours, but it's the same state cuts that they're going to get. It's just a bigger slice of the pie, and they're looking at 20% cuts, and they've done their FTEs, and again, not a like-sized town, but they're a close-by town, and there are no other towns that I know of that are limiting their cuts right now at 5%. I come from a position of you deal with it up front, and the changes could be, if we're wrong, then the changes can go. It's easier to put the money back into people's pockets than take it out later.
Excuse me, this is Carol. I've been following Franklin for a couple of years just because I happen to live in Medway. They had a deficit last year of $2 million. They're attributing it to the charter school issues that they have going on over in Franklin. So I think their issues are much larger than just the COVID-19 issues.
Right, I was about to say that too. I've read about the Franklin stuff for a few years. They've been having systemic financial problems. I think COVID-19 took that $2 million deficit and pushed it over the edge. And I think we've been better financial managed by far than Frank, for whatever reason, the charter schools or whatever situations, but we haven't had the same financial issues that they've had.
Yeah, I would just ask you to read their the letter that's been posted on their website or their local newspaper, which is specific to COVID. It does reference that there are other budget issues, which are small potatoes compared to what they're projecting. And you can go through, Google it, Google Massachusetts local budget cuts. Everybody is projecting more than 5%. We're alone in that.
I think another thing people have to take into consideration on some of these towns, and I do appreciate that we don't know what the cuts will be in the end, but that a lot of these surrounding communities are very dependent on the commercial base. So, you know, fortunately in this situation for Millis, we don't have a big commercial base, so that we're not being negatively impacted by that.
Yep. Other comments? Joyce?
Just that I tend to agree with both Pete and Craig that the deduction should be greater, and I respect Pete's opinion as to why he feels that, and I tend to agree. And Craig, I agree with you as far as a deeper cut, because then the staff would be able to collect unemployment. But then if you play devil's advocate, then you're just putting on more responsibility for the next generation and more expenses and more problems. So we could fix it now by doing that, but how it affects our poor kids and their kids are going to just be screwed. This country's getting into such debt. So do you fix it now because it's happening now and not worry about the future? Or I don't know. And that's just a, you know, philosophical question. I don't know that I have the answer, but maybe that's something to think about as well.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Carol, go ahead.
I just want everybody to realize that in November, we will have a much clearer picture. So for right now, for us to take the 5% route, knowing that we will see how things happen over the next several months, we'll have the opportunity to adjust ourselves in November if we need to. We did put together the 10% reduction as well for the state aid and local receipts. So, I mean, that's something. It's not like this is a one-size-fits-all and we're done. We do have an opportunity in the future if we need to make another adjustment.
But then that just makes it harder for the town employees.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Cathy
Cathy,
MacInnes?
go ahead.
Just, you know, not to beat this, we're finishing this up, but the town administrator did say that no department could absorb one full-time employee getting let go, that it was more beneficial for the hours. And also, I think I heard that the town hall is going to be closed on Wednesdays to allow the staff to catch up and not be have to deal with working at the front desk or anything, that they'd be able to get the work done, hopefully, based on that. I think that was something they said. And I just want to remind, the town has to balance their budget. The federal government doesn't. So we're not, this committee is not going to put things off to our children and grandchildren because we can't. Thanks.
Well, right.
Well, you do if you keep collecting unemployment, and if you keep taking from government, you do start to deplete, and you do start to take up it. I disagree there. It starts in a small town and it keeps going out through the whole country. So we are impacted. Our families are, our future children, our children and our future, their children are impacted by whatever deficits we are in and whatever borrowing we take.
Okay. All right. Other questions on the 21 budget at this point? Yes, Pete.
I'll wait till new business, old business. It's not a 21 budget question. It is for Carol though. So before if she were to leave, I would like to ask her a question before she goes.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess
Doug,
the only thing
did
with
you
the
have
FY
something?
21 budget is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's all right, Doug. He took himself off of mute for a minute,
Okay.
so just want to give him the chance if he wants to chime in.
He's still on mute.
He's on mute again, though. There
Oh,
we go.
did you see my hand?
No, I
saw
just
the
see
mute
when
go
you
off.
unmute yourself. I tend to notice that.
Is that the best way to indicate?
Yeah, that or Joyce is, waving.
Joyce says the wave.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say that I agree with everybody, but I don't.
Yeah.
I do happen to agree with Pete. However, I think the 10% number is the right minimum number. And I think Craig's point is correct that at least if you're cutting enough salary so that people can file and get some of that made up from unemployment, we can add back later, right? If we get to the fall and it looks like things are not as bad, then we can pull back. But it seems to me that we should be, and again, you're correct, Jody, that honestly, we can opine about this all we want, but our job is just to look what's put in front of us. And so I think the point here, as far as Pete's concerned and I'm concerned, is what we have in front of us, I think, is not what we'd like to see.
Yeah, Jody. And
Go ahead, Craig.
I take the approach that a special in September or November is when you know what you've got, and then you make cuts based on reality. I think the 5% is prudent. And my view on the unemployment cuts is if one position was eliminated or a half a position was eliminated, that at least puts that person in the ability to make themselves whole and doesn't impact everybody else as much. That's the only view on the unemployment side, taking an employee-centric view. The other thing, though, that I do want that does relate to it, and I mentioned it before, and it's really a little bit hyper-technical maybe, but the police department is not funded at a level high enough to support the police officers that we have right now. We are purposely not funding $90,000 of known expenses because we're hoping in November to do a transfer from the marijuana receipts into the police department. If that transfer doesn't happen, it's exactly what Pete said. You've really dug yourself a hole. You've had the guy on staff for a whole 6 months, and now you don't get the $90,000. I think it's a very disingenuous way to budget. I would say that that we have to look at the using some sort of fund, stabilization or something else for that $90,000. We know it's coming from the marijuana fund. We know it's coming in November, but we're banking on the town meeting voting to authorize the spending of it. So really, we've dug a $90,000 hole in the police budget if they don't vote yes. So it's basically putting the town meeting voters over a barrel, telling them they have to vote yes on this, or we have to cut the equivalent of what would have been 91 position over the course of the year. You now have a half year to fix it. It's I just don't like budgeting that way. I don't like spending future money, and that's what I argued on the police before. Spend the money you have, know that you've spent right, know that you have a reasonably balanced budget, and don't spend money you're banking on coming in the future, and don't spend money that you don't have. And that's what we did when we put the police on the force, and now we don't have enough to pay them, and we're not spending the stabilization money to pay them. So I think it is a dangerous precedent. And I'm in favor of paying the police. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is an anti-police thing. I'm saying let's commit to fund what we committed to do and take that stabilization money and use it and then pay it back out of the marijuana money in November when that money is available.
I guess my question would be whether we're able to do that based on the requirements that are attached to the marijuana funds.
The marijuana funds would be allowed for that because it is the school resource officer is the position that's been removed from the budget on the anticipation of not the person, just the dollars associated with it, on the anticipation of getting those monies in November to fund it. So worst case scenario, the town votes in November not to use the marijuana money. We don't have a problem because we've already committed the stabilization money. If they vote not to use it, we've got a problem in November. And I just don't like kicking the can down the road on these issues. I'd rather do it now and spend the stabilization money because we've committed to these police officers. And hopefully 90% certainty, pay it back out of the marijuana money when it becomes available.
Okay.
And so when the budget does come in, I'm anticipating amending the police budget and using stabilization funds is my proposal going to be at that point. I'm hoping that that is considered by the selectmen also that way. And we can discuss it more when it comes in, but I just wanted to give everybody a heads up that I'm going to make that, probably going to make that motion and and hopefully, you know, fund the police the way they should be funded and not hope that they're funded in November.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it is definitely worth considering.
That's not an unreasonable position at all. I could probably support that, mostly because to me, and I understand you're looking at it from a technical perspective, and it's technically you're correct. I still look at it from the perspective as that there is going to be money there one way or the other. But I think what you're saying makes sense because it's a more appropriate and specific way of covering it.
And you're not holding the November town meeting over a barrel telling them
Correct.
they have to fund this.
Right.
Yeah,
as far as the money
I
goes,
like those.
Yeah, I mean, like even you said, 90% probability. So
right.
And
I
can tell you that the store looks pretty busy when I drive by there.
And this is the 177,000. This is 80. There's 90,000 of the 177 we have in our hands. You know, so it's not like we're even waiting for somebody to cut us a check. We're waiting for somebody to tell us to use it. You know?
Yeah,
Madam
I might
Chair?
have doubled that yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Kathy.
I have a quick question being new on this. What happens if people determine not to replenish the stabilization fund with this money rather than, could they take that money once it's done and use it for something else?
Well, so we have a stabilization policy. So we have the requirement to replenish the stabilization fund if the funds are used in a certain budget cycle. And there's I think it's 3 years, you know, over which to replenish it in increments of at least 50,000. So there is a mechanism there. In terms of whether the department could use it for something else, that's a little more nuanced than my pay grade, but I'm assuming that it would just go to the police budgets and it kind of goes into the big pot. It balances, it basically funds the police budget, but it wouldn't necessarily be specific to the police budget. It would be, you know, a certain amount from taxation and then a certain amount from stabilization fund for the operating budget of the town. Is that correct, Craig?
It would be a certain amount from taxation. Yeah, we wouldn't say exactly where that was going, but the implication, because we'd have to draw the nexus between the marijuana money, we should probably make it clear that that's our intent. And I don't think I think it would pass every test that is a legitimate use of the what do you call it? Host community agreement funds. Yep. Yeah. And the other piece is that's a selectmen policy. It's not a finance committee policy. Just it was voted by the board of selectmen a while back on that 5% or the payback. You know, payback over 3 years at a minimum of 50,000 a year. It was a selectmen policy.
Oh. Okay, you're a historian.
It's not us. Some of us argued against it at the time because it was a little too rigid. But when the selectmen adopted it, we
it is now our policy.
Shrugged and said, "That's our policy."
Yep. It's better to have a policy than no policy.
Yep.
Other questions on the budget? All right, I'm going to have us move on to, I don't think we have a whole lot to discuss in terms of the warrant at this point, but I won't just skip over that unless if someone has something they want to bring up. I'll be looking for kind of that final proposed warrant next week once the select board has had their chance to meet on that. All right. So then moving on to old business, new business, and I know Pete's got something he wants to ask.
Thank you. The question is possibly for Carol. I'll defer to you for that. Has there been any submissions for the CARES local funding project proposals, for lack of a better term? I don't know what we're officially calling those, Carol, but have any of the schools or public safety submit anything related to COVID funding for 2020 or 2021 first quarter,
Yes.
second quarter?
Yes. So far, we've heard from the Board of Health, the Fire Department, the library, the police, and the schools. So Mike and I are pulling together the information so that we can go and do our submission. But that's where we are right now.
Okay. Will any of those be available for review or dissemination, even just public knowledge?
I don't know what the process is going to be, other than it's a cumulative amount, right? So there's only certain categories that we have to fill in for these areas, but everything has to meet like a direct staffing cost, or quarantine isolation cost, or PPE. It has to all be 100% COVID-19 related.
Mm-hmm.
We do have it. I don't. We have a short window to be able to file this, which is June 5th is the drop dead date for us to get this grant request in. When we submit it, I don't know. We haven't seen all of the information on the website that we need, but I don't know how detailed it needs to be. It's more for our records on this side. It is pretty detailed in the information that people put forward. We can certainly probably share it with everybody once we have a complete, summary of it.
I would just say I would be very interested in seeing it. Don't know that I have any right to the information or if it's who makes the call, but and I understand it's public, but I would like to see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll let Mike know.
Thank you.
And of course, we'll be interested once we hear back whether, how much has been approved and released and all of that. That'll be important information for us to have.
Yeah, if it is
Right.
in a position to be released, if it's ready, if it could be released to the whole committee, I'd like to see it too, and I'm sure there's others who would like to look it over. Thanks for asking for that, Pete.
Oh, sure. Right now, as I said, we're just pulling it all together. We don't have it formalized yet, but once we do, I'm sure we'll be able to send it out to people.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any other new business, old business that we need to discuss?
Madam Chair?
Yes,
It's
Lauren?
Lauren Barnes. Hi, I was just going to say to the members of this committee that we would certainly invite any and all ideas. I can tell you that I sent a list of ideas today to the town administrator and to the director of finance. So if you're having ideas, I think it's far better to get them and then let the experts sort through the list of what's eligible and what's not. My orientation was very focused on economic development and some of the marketing tools that we could use. So I would say if you are either aware of ideas from other municipalities or you have your own, I would say don't wait to just see the outcome, but certainly contribute to it, because maybe you'll have something that we didn't catch.
And what is the forum in which that would be submitted? Who should that be submitted to?
Just to email, I think, to Mike and to Carol, unless Carol wants to direct otherwise.
No, you can send it to Mike and myself. I'm the one pulling the information together, and Mike and I are going to sit and review it. So if people have, it has to be specific to COVID-19 and our, our mitigation of the COVID-19. This information, the funds are through December 31st, 2020. Any funds that we do receive, there is going to be an audit process, a very detailed audit process of how we spent the money. And if it's determined, this is both a FEMA and a MEMA, as well as the CARES Act together. Any monies that we receive that on audit are determined that they are ineligible, we have to pay back. So it's very important that it be very specific that it's COVID-19 related.
Okay. All right. Other new business? Great, thank you. So the next item is that we need to approve postmaster bill. That was included in the packet. It's a bill to the postmaster for $666.59.
Could you say that amount again, please?
Yeah, 666.59. Yeah.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the postmaster bill for $669.59.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the payment of a bill to the postmaster for $666.59. This is for the this is the Finance Committee report.
Correct.
Okay, I had to look back at the agenda. All right, all in favor, please say aye. I will go in turn. So aye, Pete Berube.
Aye.
Joyce.
Aye.
Katie.
Aye.
Doug. All right, he says aye. Craig.
Aye.
Cathy.
Aye.
And Sean.
Aye.
Sure.
All right, thank you very much. All right. And then we're going to postpone the approval of our minutes from our last meeting to our next meeting. And then, Deirdre, is there anything else that we need to attend to tonight?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay.
Sorry about the minutes, I didn't have a chance to do them.
No worries. So at our next meeting, we will be hopefully presented with the final warrant as presented by the select board. And then we will have to vote on our recommendations, start voting on our recommendations once we see what that warrant is. And then our final recommendations will be the following week, June 10th. And then we will have 5 days to turn those around and write up our articles to get them to Deirdre to get the report to the printer. So we have a pretty quick turnaround time. But as I understand it, we're looking at possibly collapsing the warrant to not have quite so many articles, just to make it easier while we're dealing with these unprecedented times for a town meeting. So Lauren, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I can just clarify that. So at June 1st, the town moderator is coming forward, and she has been working with town council on a couple of scenarios that might change the original town warrant that we walked through at our last meeting for a combination and the intent to collapse the time through potentially, as I'm told, a combination of what they call consent articles. Those are ones that can be, you guys know this, that can be bundled together because they are like articles, things like payments of bills, rather than going through one at a time. Those of you who are writing up your arguments will be able to dispense with, some multiple of articles, 5 articles at once, by saying, these are all the same thing, articles 1 through 5 for different items. And then also as a result, we would be pushing forward bylaw discussion-based articles for the fall town meeting. The intent being to minimize the time in a constricted area, the details of which are yet to be shared, so we don't have them. The other thing I was going to say is that we are definitely still looking for election workers. So those of you who know college students, I think you have to be over 18, college students who are at home looking for employment, or anybody who's underemployed or has an interest in earning some extra money, your training is paid as well as your election duty service. And all you have to do is reach out to townclerk@millisma.gov to get into the loop. But recruitment has been problematic, and so we may in fact even be collapsing the hours of the election itself. So all of this stuff is on the agenda for Monday the 1st, and I just thought you guys should know it.
All right. Thank you so much, Lauren. We appreciate you being here to keep us up to date on what the select board is doing.
I'd hate
Joyce?
to miss a good party.
No, yeah, we're the life of the party here. Joyce, you're on mute now.
Still on
Joyce,
mute.
Joyce, you're on mute. There we go.
Okay, Lauren, thank you for being here. You heard the concerns that Peter and Craig had about the 5%. Will you be bringing that back to Jim, and will you be bringing back to the board their concerns, or is it a pretty given that it's going to stick to the 5%?
Well, I can tell you that Craig and Peter, I think, and maybe even you, participated in the select board meeting of 2 weeks ago, at which the 5% target was agreed to. And in keeping with my MO right up to the finish line, I was the lone dissent because I felt actually in agreement with you that from all the research I had done and conversations I'd had with legislators, and it's all of this is in the public domain, as Pete says. I think that the 5% is going to be really conservative. And I brought up a couple of very specific ideas, one related to the library. And I've also been asking about consolidating enterprise mailings. So I really feel philosophically that pennies add up to dollars and dollars then grow from there. But I haven't found a lot of agreement as to some of those ideas. So whether or not there's some more firepower from FinCom wanting to revisit some of those things. The forum is public, and it's our public meeting starts at 5 o'clock on Monday.
5 o'clock?
Yep. Zoom, box 350, Boston, Mass. 02134. Send it to Zoom. Yeah.
Well, only because there are people here in the finance committee that, I mean, I think there are a lot of people, I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for 3 of us and possibly 4 that feel that it's, and maybe 5, thinks that it is too low of a amount. So I don't, from what I've seen so far being on the committee, we don't have a lot of say in decision making. We can give our recommendations, but sometimes I feel that your board, who rightfully so, I guess, have the power to make the decisions. But if you think that some of us who feel that it should be lower should come to present it on the Zoom meeting Monday, I by all means will try to be there. If you being the spokesperson for us, you feel is going to be impactful enough, then I would ask you to say how we feel.
I think you're overstating my heft as a spokesperson, given the fact that I was the dissent. I was in agreement with the decision to do a 10% cut. I would, if your board wants to take an official position, I will be obviously at that meeting, as will Carol. So if somebody wants to, on behalf of your board, pen a universal statement, but I don't know whether or not you stand as universal either. So I would really defer to you guys. What I can certainly say is that I participated in the meeting, but Carol did too, as a town employee and director of finance, and she can certainly represent, there's a divergence of opinions. Craig would like to see kind of what the proof points are in the budget. And I know that there's some other people who feel like the 5% isn't enough. And I can tell you, I've been on the receiving end of some fairly scorching emails of late on the part of various people advocating for different positions within their budgets and what the impacts will be. I mean, there's no fun in doing this, and nobody takes any pleasure in it. And we're kind of all in it together. And, I know I've put forth some ideas that I think are reasonable and had them shot down. So I think that's probably just the deliberative process. I think if we do more now, my singular opinion, which is not a board opinion, my singular opinion is that the more we can do now, the less we will have to do at a special town meeting. And I also feel, on the basis of past special town meetings that we know about somewhat memorably, that we may not have the full complement of participants that we would really want for a second round of this. So,
and we have the greater expense of a special town meeting.
And Madam
Correct.
Chairman?
Yeah, Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. I think the 5% is an appropriate level cut. I'm just suggesting that we look at whether there's a way to make it so some of the employees could be benefits eligible to spread the, lessen the pain to the employees. I think 5% is a reasonable starting point. I've said that from the beginning. I think we may have to revisit it, but I've always been in favor of revisiting as soon as it happens. But I don't want to think that I'm advocating for 10 or more. 5% is where I want to be, but I would rather look at the, I'd rather look if there's a employee friendly way to make the cuts so that we can allow people to jump onto unemployment if possible.
Yeah, I would hope that the town
let me speak to
administrator and
that.
the different departments are taking that approach to try to minimize the impact to employees as much as possible. Was that Carol
Just as
talking?
We did look at, we did look at that, and this is the way to minimize it to all employees. And also, as I mentioned before, the bulk of the people affected are in my group, whether it's the treasurer's office, my office, or the assessor's office. I am not in a position where any one of these offices can lose a person. This was the best way that we could make sure that we still have efficiencies to keep the town running. It's going to be a sacrifice, no doubt about it, for all of us. But at the end of the day, we only have so much money, and this is the best way that we could find to use it for the 5% cut. If it went to a 10% cut, the Veterans Memorial Building is not impacted because we've already been impacted in the 5%. So there are no further impacts to the Veterans Memorial Building. It would be to other departments would have to pick up additional reductions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's all we have tonight. It looks like we're going to have a packed meeting next week as we have the warrant to really go through, hopefully, the established warrant, and we can start making some recommendations based on that. And we may have questions that we'll receive answers to on June 10th. But those are kind of two key meetings. Hope everyone can make it as much as possible, these next two meetings, because they will be key to our recommendations and to the report that we put together for the residents.
Can I ask a question? I'm just curious if anybody, we're looking at a policy going forward down the road that would somehow address the use of remote meeting participation as would stand within state law. And I'm just wondering if people have a feeling one way or the other that they would want communicated in such a policy, since you guys have used it very effectively.
I think it definitely has its pluses and minuses. I personally think it's a little easier for us to make decisions together when we are kind of in the same place. But on a personal level, it's a little easier for me to be at home and not have to drive to town hall for a meeting. But yet I do have to deal with family members coming in the room to get snacks in the middle of a meeting, and me yelling at them that I'm on camera and to get out. So, you know, it definitely has its pluses and minuses. Joyce, you're muted. There you go.
I would say the one thing that I found difficult with it, I mean, I found this, what you just said has been very good, you know, being at my home, being able to do it from the house, and doing it right now, it's been at a nicer time for us. What I have found difficult and challenging is going through all the paperwork on the computer, on my laptop, trying to read everything, decipher everything, trying to flip things around so that it's not sideways and go in the correct, you know, direction. So that is what I've found to be the most challenging. Other than that, it's been, I think, very, and you know, and Deirdre's done a wonderful job of supplying information for those who request it. But at the same time, knowing that she's so slammed with work, I've stopped requesting. So, but I would find, that's what I find difficult and challenge.
Thank you, Joyce. Kathy, did you want to say something?
I'm all set, Madam Chair.
Oh, okay.
I'm just sitting in a chair in the living room here, you know, just chilling. And but I understand what you said or someone said about being together to deliberate. And, you know, it's always good to have someone sitting next to you to just show you something on the computer that I might not have understood when the speaker was there or something, but that I miss. But sitting in my chair, I don't. And the mute button back again.
I prefer the face-to-face meetings, and also, honestly, these early meetings, they just don't work for me. I mean, as it proved today, you know, I'm working until right up till 6 o'clock every day, best case. You know, the PBC still meets at 7, which is great. You know, the Permanent Building Committee, and that allows us to get everything done and still, you know, have time to have dinner or a break between going from a 3-hour budget conference call for work to a hour and a half for me, hour and a half call on this for budget. So I think a little later always works, and there's no way I can hit a selections meetings at 5. That's just not going to happen. So I'm not going to be able to hit that one. So I prefer the evening meetings. They fit my schedule better. If you're not working, if you're retired, the daytime meetings work great, but a lot of us don't fall into that category yet.
I'm not retired, just to be clear.
I'm not retired either.
But
Yeah,
I
a
am.
couple of the other, yeah.
Craig, I have a solution.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
My drink is empty.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn.
That's the trick.
All in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jody.
Thank you, Judy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.